I'm Jacqueline Sirois, and I'm a fellow at the 2023 TBLSA, the Transformative Business Law Summer Academy. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Laura Mai. I'm a faculty of the TBLSA 2023 and also a postdoc at Tilburg Law School in the Netherlands.
So I noticed that you research how ways of thinking and doing law are becoming reconfigured under conditions of the unfolding climate crisis. How do you approach your research?
Yeah, so to date, my research has mostly focused on the Paris Agreement and specifically the role of cities and banks in implementing that treaty. And so following COP21, so the 2015 climate conference, where the Paris Agreement was reached, the question now no longer is, the key question now no longer is how to negotiate international climate targets and find consensus on what needs to be done between governments. But now the question is, we have that agreement, and so how do we work together to reach the goals of the treaty? So it's now not about negotiation, but very much about implementation. And so looking at the implementation of the treaty, I really work across disciplines. So I don't take a legal doctrinal approach, but something that's called a social legal perspective, meaning that I draw on a diverse set of literatures ranging from social theory, anthropology, human geography, political sciences, legal theory, and governance scholarship. And I also work with empirical data, meaning I did fieldwork at the climate conferences and also interviewed climate law and policy experts. So I draw these things together and don't respect disciplinary boundaries necessarily. And that then gets me to think about what does it mean for law to kind of operate under the conditions of the unfolding climate crisis, as you framed it. And what I try to do is to be self-reflexive. So to ask myself continuously when I'm doing my research, when I'm thinking about these questions, whether I'm actually asking the right questions, whether I'm speaking in the right language, meaning in terms of the discourses that I draw on, the concepts that I use. So it's a constant questioning that I think is key in trying to really to reconfigure what we understand to be law and what we understand how law operates. I'm also asking myself continuously, am I looking at the right spaces? Am I looking at the right people and institutions? Who really needs to be at the table? And also then, who are the audience that I want to address? So it's like these kind of self-reflection, cross-disciplinary, how I would describe my research.
And do you have examples of ways in which we can get in front of the climate crisis instead of trailing behind?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question in terms of how you frame it. And I'm not sure if I could give you an answer in terms of that question. I think I want to ask another question. Because for me, really, the climate crisis is ongoing. It's unfolding, as you said in the first question yourself. So we're living in climate crisis. And so the point is not so much that we kind of need to get in front of it and that we're lagging behind. But for me, there's a real need to figure out how we do this, how we navigate the crisis as we are living in it, as it is happening all around us. So I guess we're already there. It's not a future phenomenon. And so the point is really, what do we do now that we're already in the middle of it?
And in your view, how can public and private actors come together to address climate change?
Yeah, so the question of coming together, and I think it has come up in our group discussions on stream number 3. I think coming together is a very nice way of putting it, because I think there's two sides of it, or sides to it, essentially. So one is, and we've discussed this as well, it is about cooperation, collaboration, and dialogue. So changing things together, working together. And we might think of that in terms of consensus-based coming together, some sort of cooperation going on. But then on the other side, and I think we can't forget that there's also conflict. There's negotiation of difference, and there's also competition. So there are also antagonistic dynamics that we really need to think through and think about when we think about this coming together. So and that can be difficult to reconcile the two, but to keep them in mind, I think is really important.
And what does the law offer as a tool for addressing climate change?
Yeah, what does the law offer as a tool? And there, I mean, we need to unpack this question a little bit, because it implies that the law can actually be used as a tool, and I think in a certain way it is. But the question then becomes, and that goes back to my point about being self-reflective, is it the right way to only think or primarily think about the law as a tool? Do we not need to think also about how we might need to think differently and do law differently itself before thinking this is what we have as law, and then we just run with it and apply it as an instrument. So there's certainly value of like looking at the impact of law, and law has huge functions in terms of organizing markets, constituting the states, allocating resources, resolving conflicts, negotiating interests, justice. All of this, of course, is what law can offer. But in addition to that, we also need to think what it means to be law in climate crisis. So how we do and think law is just as important as thinking about what can it do for us, basically.
And how do you describe the bringing together of theory and political action in climate change law?
Yeah, bringing together theory and political action. And again, I kind of want to come back to the assumptions that come with that question. And I'm not sure I would frame it in terms of a bringing together, because that implies that theory and action are separate. And I think they're really intertwined, they're entangled, they feed off each other. And if you think about it, how, daily life situations, the way of how we make sense of the world and how we think about things makes possible or impossible certain kinds of actions. So our thoughts and mental models, the paradigms that we think with, really can open up or foreclose possibilities for action. So they're really connected. And I'm really inspired here by Foucault, who in a 1982 interview said, and I'm going to quote him, "From the moment one begins to be unable any longer to think things as one usually thinks them, transformation becomes simultaneously very urgent, very difficult, and altogether possible." And for me, that just beautifully captures how theory and action really, really work together.
And to bring it back to the TBLSA and what we're here for this week, would you like to share any thoughts about your experience at the Summer Academy and as a faculty member?
Yeah, sure. It's been unique. It's been an out-of-the-box teaching experience that bridges disciplines, connects academic students, practitioners from both banks, businesses, and public agencies, and also activists. And I think that is really unique. I'm very humbled to have been part of it, to have learned together, to have learned from colleagues, to have learned from our group, Working Group 3. And we're still very much in the middle of it. And so I look forward to how it develops in the next few days.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today and for this interview. And during the week, I've learned a lot from you.
Well, thank you. And thanks for inviting me.